So look around the world right now. Just, look at the headlines.
Right. It's intense.
It really is. Look at the international data. Over 120 million people.
Yeah.
That is how many human beings are currently, right at this exact second, trapped in conflict zones across the globe.
It's a staggering number.
It's massive. 120 million people waking up every single day in the middle of a literal war.
And, when we think about those people, common sense tells us a very specific story. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
And it tells us a story about how human beings react to that kind of
Yeah.
extreme environment.
Right, because common sense says that living under the constant everyday threat of violence makes people cautious.
Exactly. It makes them conservative.
You naturally just assume that if someone is dodging literal explosions, they become these hyper-rational survivalists.
You assume they start calculating every single odd in their daily life.
Because they have to.
Right, because when you are in a conflict zone, one wrong move, one miscalculated risk could be fatal.
Yeah.
So the assumption is that the brain adapts to extreme danger by becoming an absolute cold-blooded calculating machine.
Right. You'd think they become the ultimate rational actors, maximizing every single resource they have just to survive the week.
But we are pulling apart an unprecedented study today.
Yeah, from the American Economic Review.
And the core finding of this study completely, totally upends that logic.
It's crazy.
Common sense is dead wrong here. War does not make people perfectly rational survivalists.
Not at all.
No, it induces a hidden, highly specific kind of financial madness.
Financial madness. That's what we are exploring in this deep dive today. We are looking at how trauma fundamentally rewires the human brain's relationship with risk.
And security.
Yeah, risk and security. And we have a wild collision of worlds here to prove it.
Oh, absolutely. We are looking at precise, classified military data.
Which is mind-blowing on its own.
Right. We are looking at psychological, emotional triggers.
Yeah.
And we're looking at experimental economic games played by everyday civilians.
In the middle of a war zone.
In Afghanistan.
To really grasp the gravity of this, I want you to think about that classic survival movie trope.
Oh, yeah.
You know the one. The hero is surrounded by danger, and they suddenly become incredibly stoic.
Like they're analyzing the math of their escape perfectly.
Exactly. But what if real danger doesn't do that at all?
Well, it doesn't.
Right. What if real danger makes people completely unpredictable when it comes to their future?
To understand this specific brand of madness, we first have to watch the collapse of the very foundation of modern economics.
The whole thing just crumbles.
Because for decades, the elite economists of the world built their entire global framework on a single, unshakable assumption.
And what's that?
That humans are rational calculators.
Right.
They built massive mathematical models, and from those models, they built global financial policies.
And all of it, like the whole house of cards, rested on the idea that if you give a human being a financial choice, they will use a cold mathematical formula to find the most profitable outcome.
Yes. And today, we get to watch that model shatter.
Just break into a million pieces.
We watch it completely break apart under the sheer, unquantifiable weight of human fear.
So let's walk through the actual math of that standard economic model first, just so we know exactly what is breaking here.
Good idea.
There is this concept that dominates the field, right? It's called expected utility.
Yes.
And a core pillar of that is the independence axiom.
Which sounds incredibly boring.
It does sound boring. So let's strip away all the academic jargon entirely. What does that actually mean for you and me when we are making a decision?
It means your preferences should be perfectly stable.
Okay.
Regardless of the surrounding environment. Let's say you prefer an apple to an orange today.
Sure.
You're just sitting calmly in your kitchen. According to the independence axiom, you shouldn't suddenly prefer the orange just because someone yells fire in the building.
Oh, wow. Okay.
The external panic shouldn't change your internal baseline valuation of those two fruits.
Because the math doesn't change. A dollar is a dollar. A 50% chance of winning $100 is mathematically worth exactly $50.
Yes.
Standard economics assumes we calculate that 50% chance purely by the numbers.
It assumes we are basically emotionless when we stare at a spreadsheet.
Like robots.
Basically. It assumes we only care about the final expected payout.
So expected utility theory says you just multiply the probability by the payout, and boom, that is the objective value.
Right. If you are offered a gamble, you evaluate it based on that objective math. But, this assumes a sterile environment.
That perfect world.
It assumes we are all sitting at a perfectly fair game of roulette.
But the real world is essentially a rigged casino.
Absolutely.
Economists are sitting in their nice, safe offices, assuming we are all looking at this clean, balanced roulette wheel.
Placing our bets with flawless logic.
Right, but they are ignoring the fact that fear is standing right there in the room.
And fear tilts the entire table.
The ball isn't rolling straight anymore.
No, it's not. And that tilted table completely destroys the predictive power of the mathematical model.
So standard models assume that you should only care about the expected payout.
But human beings are deeply, profoundly attached to certainty.
We really are.
We don't just want a good mathematical bet. We want a sure thing.
We want a guarantee.
Exactly. But, I mean, if you are an elite economist trying to prove that fear tilts the table, you can't just stay in a safe laboratory.
You can't run another computer simulation.
No.
Or just pull a bunch of comfortable graduate students on a campus.
You have to go where the fear is real.
Which is exactly what this group of top scholars did.
This academic pioneering at its absolute most extreme.
It really is. The researchers leading this charge, Michael Callen, Mohammad Isaqzadeh, James D. Long, and Charles Sprenger, they had to leave these pristine, sun-drenched campuses.
Places like Stanford and UCLA.
Right. They packed their bags and stepped directly into a war zone.
They took experimental economics, which is a field usually dominated by bored college sophomores playing computer games for extra credit.
Right, for a $10 gift card.
Yeah, and they dragged it into a life-and-death reality in Afghanistan.
That takes an incredible amount of conviction. Because you can't ethically traumatize people in a lab in California just to see how their financial logic changes.
You definitely cannot simulate the existential dread of a car bomb in a classroom.
No.
They needed to know how real-world visceral violence impacts decision-making.
But just conducting this kind of rigorous, controlled experiment in an active conflict zone, I mean, the logistical and ethical hurdles there are almost impossible to comprehend.
Oh, it's a nightmare. This took place around December 2010.
Okay.
The researchers didn't just parachute in and start handing out Western surveys on clipboards.
That would be a disaster.
They trained 247 local Afghan enumerators to conduct these interviews.
247?
Yeah. They had to ensure the questions weren't culturally offensive. They had to navigate a landscape where just carrying physical money to pay the participants for the experiment was a deadly security risk.
Which naturally leads to the methodology itself.
Yes.
Because you're dealing with an environment where you can't hand out complex, text-heavy surveys with percentages and decimal points.
The literacy rate in many of these areas was quite low.
So how do you get over 1,000 people to clearly understand and play a game of statistical chance under those conditions?
Well, they had to make the risk tangible.
Tangible.
Right. They couldn't write 30% probability on a piece of paper and expect standardized comprehension.
Right.
So the enumerators used ripped pieces of paper.
This part blows my mind.
They physically tore 10 pieces of paper, numbered them 1 to 10, and dropped them into a bag.
It is such a beautifully simple workaround. You are literally using torn paper in a bag to uncover a psychological truth that highly educated Western models have completely missed.
Well, let's look at the sheer scale of the achievement here. They reached out to over 2,000 respondents, and 1,127 Afghan civilians consented to participate in the experimental component.
1,127 people in the middle of a conflict.
Agreeing to make complex financial choices.
And the bag method makes the math undeniable to anyone. If the enumerator tells you that drawing numbers 1 through 3 means you win, that is a 30% chance.
You can see the 10 papers go in.
Right, you can touch the bag. The probability isn't an abstract concept on a screen.
It is a physical reality right in front of you.
And the stakes they used were highly relevant to the daily lives of these civilians.
Very relevant. They used hypothetical gambles involving payouts of 150 and 450 Afghanis.
Let's contextualize those numbers for a second.
Sure.
What does 150 or 450 Afghanis actually represent on the ground in a provincial center in Afghanistan back in 2010?
It represented roughly 1 to 3 days' wages for an average worker.
Wow, so this isn't pocket change.
No, it isn't a theoretical penny.
This is the difference between feeding your family for half the week or not. The financial weight of the decision was very real to them.
And that level of engagement really shows up in the data.
Because despite the rudimentary tools, using essentially paper scraps in a bag, they achieved pristine data.
Pristine. The Afghan respondents didn't just rush through it to get it over with.
Their focus and the consistency of their choices actually matched or even exceeded the standard Western subject pools.
They were actively wrestling with the math and the risk.
Because the choices they were given were designed to expose a very specific flaw in human logic.
These 1,127 people were presented with two financial decisions.
Two choices on a table.
Mathematically, these two choices are practically twins. But psychologically,
Different universes.
they belong to completely different universes.
So let's set up the two tasks exactly as the participants saw them. What was task one?
Task 1 is a game of pure uncertainty. It's a gamble.
Okay.
The participant is given a 50-50 chance, a coin flip, essentially.
Using the bag.
Right. If you win, you get the big prize, 450 Afghanis.
Nice.
If you lose, you get the smaller prize, 150 Afghanis.
Oh, so you are guaranteed at least the small prize.
Yes, but you are gambling for the big one.
Okay, a 50-50 shot at tripling your money. That's task one. What is the alternative? What is task two?
Task 2 is the anchor of the whole experiment.
Okay.
Task 2 gives you a 100% certainty of getting 150 Afghanis.
Absolute ironclad certainty.
No coin flip, no reaching into a bag, no drawing numbers. The enumerator just hands you the 150 Afghanis.
So it's the classic game show dilemma, but stripped of all the flashing lights.
Exactly. Do you take the guaranteed cash sitting right in front of you, or do you spin the wheel for a chance at the jackpot, knowing you might end up with less?
And the researchers wanted to find out the precise psychological value of that guarantee.
How much is absolute certainty really worth to a human mind?
To find out, they slowly, methodically changed the probabilities on the wheel.
Right. They kept making the gamble better and better to see when the person would finally break.
So they would say, okay, what if the bag only gives you a 10% chance at the 450 jackpot?
Do you want the bag or the guaranteed 150?
And most people obviously take the guarantee.
Then they ask, what if we increase the bag to a 20% chance?
Then 30%, then 40%.
They were hunting for the switch point.
The exact mathematical moment where a person's brain says, okay, the odds are finally good enough, I will drop the absolute guarantee and I will take the gamble.
And when they charted those switch points,
Yeah.
when they compared how people valued the guaranteed cash versus the spinning wheel, the results broke the expected utility models completely.
This is the mind-blowing part.
They documented the birth of what they call the certainty premium.
Which completely subverts common sense from a mathematical standpoint.
It really does.
Yeah.
Standard textbooks say you shouldn't care very much if a payout is 99% certain versus 100% certain.
Let's explain why the textbook says that, just to be clear.
Yeah.
Mathematically, the distance between a 99% chance and a 100% chance is exactly 1%.
Right.
It is the exact same distance as the difference between a 50% chance and a 51% chance.
Exactly. If you are calculating expected utility, that 1% shift should barely move the needle on how much you value the bet.
It should be a tiny blip, but the human brain does not process it that way.
Not at all. The Afghan civilians, through their highly consistent choices, proved that 100% certain holds this magical, deeply irrational power over human logic.
The researchers define this massive leap in value as the certainty premium.
If both options on the table involve some level of risk, say, choosing between a 50% chance and a 60% chance,
Yeah.
the participants calculated the odds completely normally.
They acted like perfect little economists.
They did. But the very second you offer an option with a 100% guarantee,
Their rational math goes completely out the window.
it is a fatal blow to traditional theory. Expected utility predicts this. Certainty premium should be absolute zero.
Zero.
There should be no massive spike in value just because you hear the word guaranteed.
Even modern behavioral economic theories like cumulative prospect theory, which was designed specifically to account for human psychological quirks.
Even that cannot fully explain the massive vertical leap in value that these people assign to the 100% sure thing.
I think of it like going to a coffee shop.
Okay.
You are willing to pay $10 for a cup of coffee, but suddenly you are willing to pay $50 for the exact same cup of coffee just because the barista gives you a solemn promise that you absolutely won't spill it.
It's an irrational markup.
You are paying a massive penalty just for the feeling of safety.
And the researchers measured exactly how high that penalty was.
They asked just how much extra were these civilians willing to pay in terms of lost potential wealth to secure that guarantee.
And the number they found is staggering.
Because peace of mind isn't free. But for people living near a war, Peace of mind has an astronomical markup.
A 37% extra cost.
Let's break that down so we understand the true weight of it. What does a 37% premium actually mean for their wallets?
It means that the baseline certainty premium in this sample was 37%. In practical terms, these civilians valued the 150 Afghanis with absolute certainty as if it were worth an extra 37% chance of winning the maximum payout.
Wow.
They were willing to sacrifice massive amounts of potential future wealth just to lock in the absolute guarantee today.
That is a punishing financial penalty to voluntarily put on yourself. You are essentially taxing your own future at 37%, just to avoid any ambiguity.
And to give you context for how incredibly high that is.
Yeah, compared to us.
This 37% premium is roughly double the premium researchers find when they run this exact same experimental game on U.S. college students.
Double the premium.
Double. The college students like certainty, sure, but the Afghan civilians are completely dominated by it.
They aren't just afraid of losing a bet. They are fiercely, almost pathologically drawn to a sure thing.
But this naturally leads to the hardest, most critical question of the entire study.
Which is why.
Why is the premium double?
Is this just because they have less wealth overall?
Or is it because they live in a literal war zone where car bombs are a reality?
Right. You would just assume that living in a war zone permanently changes your brain.
You'd assume that the constant exposure to violence permanently rewires your baseline tolerance for risk.
But to prove that, the researchers had to look at the baseline behavior of the people living in the absolute eye of the storm.
Before any psychological triggers were introduced.
And this is where the data reveal something completely, totally counterintuitive.
Without a specific emotional trigger, people living next to daily explosions make financial choices exactly like people living in total peace.
Wait, what? That completely upends the logic.
It does.
You assume proximity to danger hardwires you for caution. But you're saying at rest, their baseline is identical to a suburbanite.
Yes. Let's unpack the baseline findings of the calm ones.
Okay.
The researchers mapped the respondents' financial choices against the violent history of their specific neighborhoods.
They isolated the baseline preferences.
Meaning how these people played the paper bag game before any emotional priming or manipulation happened.
And what was the correlation between living in a violent neighborhood and their baseline risk tolerance?
Statistically, there was no significant relationship.
Where at all?
None. Living in a neighborhood with administratively measured intense violence did not independently change their experimentally elicited risk preferences.
This is genuinely shocking to me.
Right.
You think the war has permanently mutated them? You think living next to a military checkpoint that gets attacked makes you a paranoid financial hermit for the rest of your life?
You'd think your base tolerance for risk would just crater.
But it doesn't.
Living in a violent area didn't permanently rewrite their baseline financial logic. At rest, when they are calm, they are as rational as anyone else.
Oh, wow.
On a 10-point scale of risk tolerance, their baseline was roughly a 2.2.
Okay.
That is functionally the exact same baseline as people living in completely safe, untouched zones.
It's like finding out someone who survives a horrific shipwreck every single month still happily goes down to the dock and buys a regular boat ticket.
They aren't changed at all at their core.
At their unprovoked baseline, they are not changed, which makes that massive 37% certainty premium we just talked about even more mysterious.
Exactly. If their baseline is normal, where is the madness coming from?
What changes them? Why is everyone in the world so convinced that trauma alters risk if the baseline data says it doesn't?
Because they are only calm until you flip a very specific switch.
A switch buried deep in their memory.
And this is where the experimental design becomes brilliant.
The fear switch. A single, simple sentence. That is all it took.
One sentence detonated a financial storm in the minds of these respondents.
Let's talk about the psychological priming phase of the experiment.
So the researchers couldn't ethically start explosions outside the windows to see how people reacted under stress.
Obviously not.
But they could trigger the memory of an explosion.
Ah.
They randomly split the 1,127 respondents into 3 groups before asking them to play the financial game.
Okay, 3 groups. How did they prime them?
1/3 of the people were asked a simple question. Could you describe an event in the past year that caused you happiness or joy?
This is the happy group.
Another third were asked, could you describe a general event from the past year?
That's the neutral group, just recalling a regular Tuesday.
And the final third, the critical group.
What did they ask them?
They were asked, Could you describe an event in the past year that caused you fear or anxiety?
This is the fear group, and this relies on a deep psychological mechanism. You can't traumatize someone in an experiment, but asking them to recall trauma changes their internal state.
Just the physical act of remembering fear, visualizing it, speaking about it, changes the chemical and emotional state of the brain in real time.
It immediately shifts their cognitive framework.
The group that was primed with fear, the group that spent a few minutes talking about an anxiety-inducing event, suddenly showed drastically different financial behaviors when they were asked to play the paper bag game right afterward.
But wait,
Yeah,
if I'm a skeptic looking at this, I'm thinking, memory is incredibly subjective.
sure it is.
If you ask a comfortable college student what made them afraid last year, they might say a really bad job interview or a car breaking down on the highway.
Right.
A civilian in Kabul might say they watched a suicide bomber detonate in the market. How do the researchers know what these people actually lived through? How do you quantify the reality of their fear?
That is the most rigorous part of the entire study. They didn't just take the respondents' subjective word for it. They needed objective, undeniable proof of what these specific neighborhoods had endured.
Okay.
And to get it, they mapped these people's brains against a classified military database.
They matched subjective emotional memory to objective geographic coordinates of violence.
The researchers gained access to the ISF-CIDAIN dataset.
What is that?
This is the International Security Assistance Force military record. It is an incredibly precise, classified log of the war.
When you say precise, how detailed are we talking? What does it mean to geocode a conflict?
We are talking about 5 decimal digit precision.
Wow.
That translates to an accuracy of within a single meter at the equator.
1 meter.
They can pinpoint the exact spot on a street where an event occurred.
They can see the specific corner of the specific intersection.
They geocoded every single military incident in the country from April 2002 to February 2010.
That's almost 8 years of data.
We're talking about direct fire engagements, improvised explosive devices, suicide attacks, mine strikes. Over 45,000 successful attacks mapped out.
And then they overlaid that military map onto the civilians they were interviewing.
Yes. They drew a 1-kilometer radius circle around the exact polling centers where these 1,127 interviews took place.
So they knew.
They knew exactly how many bombs had gone off within a brief walk of where the respondent was sitting.
The scale of that integration is astonishing. You have the cold, hard satellite data of a military superpower crashing directly into the fragile, emotional psychology of a single civilian sitting in a chair.
And when they overlaid that objective military map with the subjective economic choices of the civilians,
A paradox emerged.
a massive paradox.
Yeah.
A completely counterintuitive discovery.
Because the bombs fell, the bullets flew. The military data proves the violence was real and present. But the objective exposure to violence didn't directly change the civilian's nature.
We have to emphasize this finding because it is the pivot point of the entire narrative.
Say it again.
Mere exposure to violence, literally living your life inside a red zone on the military map, where attacks are frequent, did not independently increase their certainty premium.
The violence alone, the proximity to danger, didn't make them crave the 100% sure thing any more than someone living in a totally peaceful village.
Correct. The unprimed people in the red zones acted just like the unprimed people in the green zones.
The objective trauma was there, but it wasn't altering their baseline financial math.
But this creates a massive contradiction.
Huge. If the violence didn't change them, why does everyone in the world assume trauma alters risk behavior?
Right.
Why do we see traumatized populations making deeply irrational financial choices in the real world if their baseline nature is unchanged?
Think about the mechanism. It's not a permanent shift.
Let's use an analogy here.
Okay.
If I get into a horrific car crash, I am terrified of driving. I drive slower every single day after that. I am permanently changed. Every time I get behind the wheel, my baseline speed is lower. Why aren't these people permanently financially slower?
Because psychological trauma isn't a permanent speed bump.
What is it then?
The trauma is a dormant chemical.
Dormant.
It is entirely inactive until it meets a catalyst.
The chemical reaction of trauma memory and violence, this is the true climax of the study's findings.
Trauma places an emotional landmine inside the human soul.
It is totally invisible. You cannot see it on an X-ray. You cannot measure it when the person is at rest playing a normal game.
It sits there, perfectly hidden, until fear steps on it.
And here is the explosive result the researchers documented.
The certainty premium only skyrocketed when individuals who lived in violent zones were also primed with the fear memory.
You need both ingredients.
Yes.
The geographic exposure creates the landmine, but the psychological trigger is what detonates it.
Look at the exact numbers. When individuals who lived in violent areas were primed to remember fear, their certainty premium jumped by 6 full percentage points compared to their baseline.
Let's translate that jump. What does a 6 percentage point increase mean for their behavior?
It equates to a 16% greater willingness to pay for certainty.
16%.
In an instant. Just by recalling a fearful event, they suddenly became willing to sacrifice 16% more of their potential wealth just to grab onto a sure thing.
The interaction between real-world violence and recalled fear is the explosive catalyst that destroys their rationality.
Exactly.
I want to use a physical analogy here to explain exactly how that mechanism works.
Go for it.
Have you ever seen a glass of supercooled water?
Like the physics experiment where water stays liquid below freezing.
Exactly. You put a bottle of highly purified water in a freezer, you cool it well below the freezing point. But because there are no impurities for the ice crystals to form around, it doesn't turn into ice.
It stays completely liquid.
Right. You could look at it sitting on a table and say, that's just a regular, normal glass of water.
But the physical state of that water is profoundly fragile. The potential energy is trapped inside.
Yes. It is fundamentally changed, but you can't see it. It is just waiting. And then you take a spoon and you just tap the side of the glass, just a tiny pin.
Or drop a single grain of salt into it.
And the entire glass instantly freezes solid.
Boom.
Boom. Solid ice in 1 second. That is exactly what trauma is doing to these people.
It perfectly explains the hidden volatility.
The violence, the car bombs, the direct fire, it super cools their brain. They walk around looking normal. They make baseline financial decisions just like anyone else. But the second you tap the glass with a fear memory,
Second they hear a siren or recall an attack.
their financial logic freezes solid. They instantly sacrifice 16% more of their wealth just to grab onto a rigid guarantee.
It's a perfect analogy. But, if you were presenting this to a room full of elite economists, the skeptics are going to push back incredibly hard on this conclusion.
Oh, absolutely. So let's play the skeptic for a second. What is the immediate counterargument a traditional economist brings up to invalidate this?
The immediate counterargument is selective migration.
Selective migration.
The skeptic raises their hand and says, look, you didn't prove that bombs make people hypersensitive to fear. You just proved that living in a violent neighborhood naturally sorts people by personality.
Oh, meaning, did all the brave, risk-tolerant people simply pack their bags and flee the city, leaving only the naturally terrified people behind?
Exactly. The selective migration argument claims that violence chases out the risk takers. Anyone with the means and the courage leaves.
So the researchers aren't measuring the effect of violence, they're just measuring a pre-existing demographic of highly anxious people who couldn't afford to migrate.
Right. It's a massive potential confounding variable.
So how do the researchers exclude that noise? How do you prove it wasn't just the cowards left behind?
They ran an exhaustion of robustness checks. First, they controlled for the obvious sociological factors. They asked, were you born locally? Or did you move here recently?
Okay, that makes sense.
They controlled for social cohesion and institutional trust. They asked, do you trust the local courts? Do you trust the police? Do you think it's important to report insurgent attacks to the authorities?
So they are trying to strip away all the external reasons someone might act differently?
But even with those controls, a stubborn skeptic could say there's still inventable bias.
Because there's always something you didn't measure.
Which is why the researchers deployed their most powerful analytical tool within polling center variation.
Within polling center variation.
This completely destroys the migration counterargument.
Okay, walk us through how that actually works in practice.
It means they didn't just compare a guy living in a violent city like Kabul to a guy living in a peaceful rural village.
Right.
They narrowed the lens drastically. They compared two next-door neighbors. Two people living on the exact same street within the exact same 1 kilometer radius.
So you take two people who are facing the exact same car bombs, the exact same local economy, the exact same migration pressures.
Identical baseline variables.
If all the brave people fled the street, then both of these neighbors are part of the same left-behind demographic.
Precisely. And then the researchers primed one neighbor with the fear prompt and gave the other neighbor the neutral prompt.
And what happened?
The neighbor primed with fear showed the massive spike in the certainty premium. The neutral neighbor didn't.
Wow, that is undeniable.
It's bulletproof.
You are saying that if two identical twins lived in the same house on this violent street and one was reminded of fear, their brain would literally process the mathematical value of a dollar bill completely differently than the other twin sitting right next to them.
Yes. The effect holds up perfectly, even when comparing people on the same block.
That's incredible.
By doing this, they prove definitively that this isn't a sociological fluke about who migrates and who stays.
It is not about pre-existing personality traits.
No. The objective violence directly rewired their internal susceptibility to fear.
That neighbor matching methodology is brilliant, but to be absolutely mathematically certain that the physical violence is the root cause, the researchers did one more test.
And this is perhaps the most fascinating part of the data.
They looked at the bombs that didn't go off.
The placebo test. The psychological secret of failed attacks.
We have to ask, does an unexploded bomb hijack the soul the same way a detonated one does?
Or does only witnessed destruction have the power to bind human behavior?
The military data they had from ISAF was incredibly comprehensive, right?
It didn't just log the explosions that caused casualties, it also logged the failures.
The data set included almost 10,000 unsuccessful attacks.
Almost 10,000.
What qualifies as an unsuccessful attack here? We are talking about IEDs that were found and cleared by engineers before they could detonate.
We were talking about hoaxes, dud mines, unexploded ordnance.
Right, nearly 10,000 instances where the enemy tried to cause mass destruction in a specific location but failed.
So the researchers asked a profound psychological question.
Yeah.
Is it the malicious intent of the enemy that traumatizes a local population? Or is it the physical realization of the catastrophic event?
Does living near a bomb that was safely defused by a bomb squad make you crave financial certainty just as much as living near a blimp that actually leveled the building next door?
They ran the data. They mapped the failed attacks against the polling centers and tested if living near intended violence had the same supercooling effect on the brain as realized violence.
And the result?
It didn't. Failed attacks had an absolute zero correlation with a spike in the certainty premium.
Zero.
No effect at all.
Zero effect.
It is not the malicious intent of the enemy that traumatizes the human mind.
Yeah.
The knowledge that someone tried to kill you doesn't plant the emotional landmine.
It is the physical realization of the event, the deafening sound, the visceral destruction, the chaotic aftermath.
This is a profound insight into how the human brain processes threat.
Think about the difference here. It is the difference between someone aiming a loaded gun at your head, pulling the trigger, and the gun jams, versus the gun actually going off and grazing your skull.
The hostile intent of the person holding the gun was identical.
The lethal threat was identical.
But the brain categorically knows the difference.
The brain biologically differentiates between a terrifying threat and a lived catastrophe.
The unexploded bomb does not plant the emotional landmine. It does not supercool the water. Only the explosion does.
But here is a sliver of hope within this incredibly dark data.
Even catastrophes have an expiration date.
Memory has a time limit.
And it has an intensity scale.
The scars of war do fade with time, but they burn the deepest when the explosion is loud and when the explosion is recent.
There is a ticking clock on human trauma.
The researchers broke the data down even further to measure this decay.
They looked at the vintage and the intensity of the violence.
Okay, so vintage meaning how old the event is.
Right. They found that more recent exposure, specifically events that happened from 2008 to 2010, closer to when the experiment was conducted,
created a much stronger susceptibility to the fear prime than older events from 2002 to 2005.
The emotional landmine rusts over time.
It becomes harder to trigger.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Psychological trauma has a half-life.
And they also looked at the type of violence.
More intense catastrophic incidents like large IED explosions or major mine strikes, those created massive, long-lasting vulnerability.
But smaller incidents, small arms fire, shootouts.
Those had a much weaker effect on the certainty premium.
The louder the bang, the deeper the freeze.
A vulnerability to being triggered, the susceptibility to that supercooled freeze is at its absolute peak right after major explosive events.
And then slowly, year by year, if the environment remains stable, that susceptibility decays.
Which means there is a golden window of vulnerability.
Right after a conflict, right after a major explosion, there is a specific window of time where a population is at their most financially irrational.
Their logic is highly triggerable.
Which forces us to ask the deepest philosophical question of the study. We know when they are vulnerable, and we know how they are triggered.
But to truly understand why people become so financially vulnerable, we have to look at what fear actually steals from us.
We are getting to the psychological truth at the bottom of all this data.
The pathological pursuit of control.
Why do terrified people willingly throw away potential wealth for a guaranteed pittance?
Why are they willing to pay a massive 37% premium just to avoid drawing from a bag?
Because they aren't buying money?
No, they are buying control.
That is the ultimate synthesis of the psychological mechanism at play here. Fear and explosive trauma do something very specific to the human mind. They violently strip away your locus of control.
Think about the reality of an IED. A bomb goes off randomly on your street,
You did absolutely nothing wrong. You were just walking to the market.
but in a split second, your entire world is shattered.
In that moment, you realize you have absolute zero control over your environment.
The universe is complete, lethal chaos.
Exactly. So when that trauma survivor is sitting in a chair a month later and an enumerator offers them the 100% certainty option in a simple financial game,
It isn't a financial calculation to them.
it is a desperate, instinctual grab to take control back from a chaotic universe.
The economists aren't measuring risk aversion. They are mathematically measuring a trauma survivor's desperate need to control their immediate environment.
The extreme certainty premium is the exact quantifiable price tag of that psychological need.
It makes me think of driving on an icy road in the dead of winter.
Oh, yeah.
You hit a patch of black ice, the tires lose traction, the car starts sliding toward the ditch.
What is the very first physical thing you do? You grip the steering wheel.
You grip it so hard your knuckles turn white.
But does gripping the wheel stop the car from sliding?
No, it does absolutely nothing physically to help the car regain traction.
It might even make the skid worse. But you do it anyway.
Because in a terrifying moment of total physical helplessness, you just desperately need to feel like you are steering.
You need the illusion of control.
You are willing to pay the physical price of that tension just to feel your hands locked on the wheel.
That is the certainty premium.
Exactly.
The 37% financial penalty is the white-knuckle grip on the steering wheel. They are paying for the illusion that they are steering their own fate.
But this desperate grip on the wheel leads to an invisible, deeply dangerous change in how a population functions.
This is the invisible change, the reshaped susceptibility.
This is the core theoretical takeaway of the entire deep dive, the grand unified theory of trauma and economics.
War does not permanently mutate your personality.
It doesn't permanently lower your risk tolerance,
It doesn't make you a permanent coward.
but it does something far more insidious.
What is it?
It turns your mind into a highly sensitive antenna, an antenna tuned perfectly to the frequency of fear.
Your baseline rink preference isn't changed, but your susceptibility to fear primes is drastically, chronically reshaped.
This connects all the massive dots we've been discussing. This is why populations in conflict zones seem to act so irrationally to outside observers.
It's not that they are constantly inherently irrational people.
It's that their environment constantly supplies the fear triggers.
Every single day, every wailing siren, every sudden shout in the market, every grim news report on the radio.
Their daily environment is a continuous, inescapable stream of fear primes that temporarily but repeatedly work their logic.
They're constantly being tapped on the glass.
Okay, my mind is spinning here. Because if I take a step back and look at the real-world implications of this,
Yeah.
if I am a bad actor, if I am a predatory institution or a corrupt local official, and I know this population is hyper-susceptible to fear,
Couldn't I easily weaponize this?
you could absolutely weaponize it. Which brings us to the dark side of this discovery.
The real-world micro-interventions.
This is essentially a golden time guide for exploitation.
If you want to financially rob a traumatized population, you don't need to point a gun at them.
Just scare them.
Remind them of the chaos, and they will willingly hand you their assets for pennies on the dollar just for a guarantee.
Because trauma victims will pay a massive premium for certainty, they become highly vulnerable, highly predictable targets.
Think about the practical implications for policymakers, but also for predatory marketers.
These populations are sitting ducks for exploitative financial products.
You are talking about predatory insurance scams.
Exactly. Or getting a desperate family to sell off their hard assets, their family land, their small businesses, their livestock, incredibly cheap.
The buyer just has to offer guaranteed cash today.
I am genuinely horrified by the mechanics of this. It's basically a blueprint for financial vultures.
Yep. go into a war-torn neighborhood during that golden window of vulnerability. You drop a flyer in their mailbox that talks about impending danger and future insecurity.
You prime them with fear.
You tap the super-cooled glass.
You tap the glass.
And then while they are frozen in that desperate psychological need for control, you offer to buy their house for half of its actual market worth.
And they take it.
Because in that frozen state, they need the 100% guarantee of cash more than they need the fair mathematical value of their property.
This is exactly why international humanitarian aid has to fundamentally change how it operates in post-conflict zones.
You can't just drop pallets of food and leave.
Financial protection, fair insurance, secure savings products needs to be deployed ethically and immediately during that golden window after a conflict.
You have to aggressively protect civilians from the predators who use fear to harvest generational wealth.
Because if you don't protect them, and you multiply this effect by millions of people across an entire country,
you get a disaster that outlasts the war itself.
Which brings us to the grand narrative, the financial black hole of geopolitics.
The true lasting cost of war isn't just the physical buildings that are leveled by artillery.
We can rebuild buildings, we can pour concrete.
The true cost is the invisible collapse of the future. It is what happens to an economy when an entire generation stops investing in tomorrow.
Let's look at the severe macroeconomic consequences of this. Broad-based, national exposure to trauma leads to stagnant, paralyzed financial markets.
If a population's fear antenna is constantly being triggered into seeking 100% certainty, they will not engage in the behaviors that grow an economy.
They will not start new businesses because startups are risky.
They won't invest in the local stock market.
They won't take out loans to buy better farm equipment or to send their kids to advanced schools.
They refuse to take the healthy, necessary economic risks that build a functioning society.
You can have the United Nations or the World Bank pump billions of dollars of international reconstruction money into a post-conflict zone.
But if the population's emotion landmines are constantly being triggered by low-level political instability, that economy will remain a black hole.
The money won't circulate.
You can rebuild the physical banks with beautiful marble floors and glass windows. But if the people are psychologically allergic to risk, those banks will just sit completely empty.
People will hoard cash under their mattresses because it feels like a 100% guarantee.
The capital never flows. The recovery never truly happens.
The war might officially end on paper. A peace treaty might be signed, but the financial freeze lasts for decades, crippling the next generation.
Which forces us to look beyond the borders of Afghanistan. Because this isn't just about one country in 2010.
The world is repeating itself. Who is the next Afghanistan?
When a sense of security becomes the most expensive, highly taxed luxury on Earth, the human mind regresses.
And right now, looking at the state of the globe, it feels like the whole world is paying the premium.
We have to broaden the lens of this study. This specific experiment was conducted in Kabul. It mathematically mapped IEDs and gunfire.
But the underlying psychological mechanism, the birth of the certainty premium, that applies to any population facing severe, repeated distress.
It applies to any systemic trauma that strips away the locus of control.
Global pandemics.
Yeah.
Massive, sudden economic crashes. Escalating, unpredictable climate disasters.
When a Category 5 hurricane destroys a coastline, or an invisible virus locks down an entire planet for a year, the locus of control is stripped away just the same as an explosion.
The universe feels like lethal chaos.
And the invisible emotional landmines are planted across the population, just waiting for the 24-hour news cycle to tap the glass.
This leaves me with a chilling thought to end on. Look at the headlines today. Look at how much fear and anxiety is being continuously broadcast into our homes, our phones, 24/7.
It is a constant, unrelenting stream of fear primes.
Are we all slowly paying a higher and higher premium just to feel safe?
Are we giving up our futures, our potential wealth, our healthy risks just to grip the steering wheel on an icy road?
Are we becoming a planet of people sacrificing 37% of our potential just for the illusion of a guarantee?
The traditional economic model is broken. We can't see the psychological damage, but it is dictating the flow of global wealth.
Next time you are about to accept a terrible deal or a low-paying opportunity just because it feels like a sure thing, I want you to pause.
Look at the terms. Ask yourself, are you making a rational choice based on the math?
Or is a hidden fear, a recently tapped glass, pulling the strings?
Are you accurately calculating the odds of your own life, or are you just desperately trying to buy a moment of control in the dark? Thank you for joining this deep dive.